So first I want to show you, this is what it looks like digitally, what it looks like all printed out. But it's all the stuff we've been talking about for the last however many weeks. It's been a bunch of weeks, lots of weeks. So first, I tried to fit it all on one page for each section, but the one about literary devices, it went into 2 pages. But if you front and back it, it's only 4 pages. That's a summary, right? Of a whole book, right? Of a whole book, and many, many weeks of of standing up here waving my arms, yeah. So, but just different stuff. So, like, what's the purpose of this part of the study? Just discern the author's intended meaning, historical, social, cultural environment of the biblical writer. Because again, we want to get to the author's intended meaning. And then, so how do we do that? We ask these kinds of questions. What's the general historical, cultural setting, which will be different depending on what part of the Bible you're in. I mean, if you're way back in, let's say Genesis, just say Genesis, right? If you're way back in time of Joseph, right? That's going to be, if you're in Egypt, it's like, oh, okay, let's consider what life in Egypt might have been like, and when he was when he was second to Pharaoh, what does that mean? And like how powerful he was. What does that actually look like? What's the historical, cultural setting? So you ask those questions. Helpful resources, so exegetical commentaries, study Bibles, Bible handbooks, Bible dictionaries. This fishbowl analogy, we spent a little bit of time on that and just talking about how, as interpreters, we need to be aware of our own subjective experience and trying not to push that onto what we read in the Bible. It's pretty easy to do. So being aware of it, like you might read something and it might mean something different to you because you have a different cultural understanding. So just being aware of it is helpful. And then just know that you're in your own fishbowl, swimming around your own cultural, historical waters. And the Bible is its own fishbowl, and those fish are swimming in those waters. And we need to make a bridge between those two, try and have an understanding. So there's a danger of misunderstanding, but we can bridge that gap. Written contextual, lexical, syntactical, my favorite, grammatical stuff. What's a preposition? I'm just playing. I know school's about to, no, you're out of school. So yeah, what's a preposition? All right, sorry to put you on the spot. Theological analysis, and then these literary ones. So we talked about similes, metaphors, proverbs, parables, allegories, typology. For the parables, the 4 questions to ask when reading a parable, like what a simile is, what a metaphor is, and then a question to ask, like what's the single point of similarity? What's being stressed here? What's the general truth of the proverb? Typology, notable resemblances, prefigurement, so it's pushing forward to what Jesus did. And then prophecy, apocalyptic literature, comparison. So like after you've done a bunch of study and you've thought about it, then you want to compare what your analysis to what other people have said, because you might be, who knows, you might be way off, or maybe they're way off. But if they're way off, you'll have reasons for why you think that they're way off. Compare your notes and see what they say. And then application, which is where we're at right now. So there's a purpose, and then just key principles and stuff to expose me. If you're wanting a digital version, I'll need your email address so I can share it with you. If you want a physical paper one, and I don't have enough ink in my many copies. This would be needed for everybody in the class, but we could totally make some copies in the church and get that to you. All right, so let's go back to all right, we're going to be back in Mark 6. All right, so last week we talked about Mark 6, and we talked about the feeding of the 5,000. We tried to make application of this story. So we're looking at a narrative section, and we're trying to see what are the theological principles that are being embodied in these particular details within this story. And then once we see those, we can try and pull out the theological principles, and then from there, make application. Does anybody remember a big point that I was like, this is super important? Oh, please remember this. Has to do with this. All right, so Jesus made them get on the boat. He constrained them. And again, if we look at that word, constrain, it means to force, to press, to compel. So they're on this boat, and of course, if you know the story, they get on the boat, they're trying to go to Bethsaida, huge storm. They're fighting against the wind and the waves for at least 6 hours in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. It's pitch black. They're working for 6 hours straight at least. And then they see someone walking on the water. They're like, oh, this is a ghost, of course. How many people walk on water? Nobody does. So they're like, here's a ghost welcoming us to the underworld. We've fought like dogs for hours and hours and hours, and now we're going to die. Great. This is it. And then Jesus would have walked past them, right? He would have passed by them. And we talked about how that is a reference to the Lord going past Moses when he's in the cleft of the rock. He would pass by them. And there's if we highlight that, yeah, Genesis 32 and Luke. Anyways, so it's not like Jesus was just gonna stroll right past and be like, yeah, whatever. You guys should have made it to Bethsaida by now, but I'm just gonna keep on stepping. It's not that. He was showing up to help. But how did the disciples see it? Right? Did they see it as help? Okay, they didn't see it as help. So that's interesting. So here comes Jesus, and they can see him. Now they misinterpret it, but they can see who he is. And it's not until he says something and he gets into the ship that the wind ceased. Okay. And again, looking at this, the toiling, right? The toiling punished by physical torture and torment. So like when they're rowing against the wind and the waves, like this isn't just like, oh man, this is kind of bad. Like it's torturous work. Right. And they're fishermen. Most of them are fishermen. Like this is not like, some of them it would be like, imagine you're Matthew. You're a tax collector, you're used to sitting in a booth, and now you're in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and like he was probably freaking out way before the other fishermen. But after 4 hours, maybe the fishermen are starting to get concerned too. Like, oh, now what does that really say? Right? So think about that. So those are kind of the general things that I wanted to talk about. So let's do say Jesus. We'll just put God sent them into the storm. Okay, so that's one detail within the story that we can broaden out a little bit and make there's a principle here, right? This isn't, so when we're making our application, this becomes important because it's not like they did something wrong and now they're suffering the consequences of doing something wrong. No. God sent them there. So this is doing God's will. So right there, you could just start thinking about, okay, if I'm doing God's will it always just be sunshine and rainbows? No, like clearly not. That's a principle from the story. Now, sometimes it will be. Sometimes it won't be so bad. In fact, if you go back into the text, Jesus sent them out 2 by 2 to go preach and stuff, and they're healing people. They're exorcising demons. They're doing all kinds of things. They're doing what Jesus told them to do, and they're amazed that they're able to do it. They're having a great time. It's like it's blowing their mind, the work that they're able to accomplish. They come back to Jesus, and they're just like, oh, this is so great. Oh, let me tell you all these stories about how awesome this has been. Like, it was really great. Sometimes it's like that. Other times it's like a storm. Just knowing that it could go either way will be helpful in your Christian life. So you don't misinterpret something. You might misinterpret a storm in your life if you don't know that it could go either way. That gives you hope, or it can, right? That would be like a driving thing, right? Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. That's actually a really good point. That's a good question to ask. What is this teaching me? So even when you've sinned and you're just suffering the natural consequences of sin, right? Which is not what's going on here. Let's say you decide to reject God's will, you do your own thing, and now there's a storm, right? It's a storm of your own making because you're suffering kind of consequences from from rejecting God's will. Even then you can learn something. Right? Like that's what the consequences are trying to teach you. But in this case, but Lord, I'm doing your will. You've called me to do this, and it's not going as well as I imagined it would be. And it's like, well, why did you imagine it would be like that instead of some other way? So this is doing God's will. All right. So what are practical things that God has called you to do? This will be different for every person in the room. There will be general categories that fit, but this is where you get the practical application of this principle of sometimes God sends you into a storm. And it's when you're doing God's will. Okay, well, what's God's will for your life? Okay, so go share the gospel. To be conformed into the image of Christ. So even the to be conformed to the image of Christ, self-sacrifice, those are still too broad. There's going to be examples in your life where, like, to be conformed into the image of Christ usually requires you to choose something. And that choice is going to be a practical thing, right? You're going to have to reject sin and choose to do what God has called you to do. And in that choice, you're being conformed, right? Something is being chiseled away. I don't know if you guys ever saw that. It's like the two guys, and it's the chisel. It's like a play, but with two guys. Okay, probably, it's really good. I can't remember. It's the skit guys. That's what they're called, the skit guys. Anyways, it's like God. One guy's acting as God, the other guy is acting as just a human being, and he's like, "Hey, what about this thing?" He's like, "Oh, you don't need to touch that thing." He goes, "Well, I'm trying to conform you into the image of Christ, so I need to chip this part away." Like, yeah, but if you touch that, it's going to hurt really bad. He goes, yeah, that's where you need healing. Like where there's pain, that's where you need healing. And once you have healing, then you'll be able to do what I've called you to do. And he just hits a hammer against what's essentially a chisel, and it makes the sound. And it's like the guy acts like it's super cool, and it is, right? But again, that's a metaphor. That's a picture of something, of a choice that you need to make. Like, what are those things in your life? Mm. All right, so let's say, yeah, getting. Oh, that's comfort. So, nope, that's still wrong. Mhm. Right. Yeah, you're getting out of your comfort zone to it's hard not to speak in metaphors, right? To be the hands and feet of Christ. Like, okay, that's still another metaphor. Like you're being the hands and feet of Christ. Like basically it's what would be a way to like compassion work. Hmm? Serving. Right. Right. So in this case, like let's say it's a homeless shelter, it could be you're certain like serving food to somebody who doesn't have food. It could be uh yeah, if you run into somebody like trying to think of other like just there's always going to be somebody holding a sign somewhere asking for money, right? And we can go up and down about how you should go about or whether or not you should go about helping that person. Right? There's lots of pros and cons. That's where wisdom comes in. It's like the guy that's like, no lie, this is for drugs. It's like probably not going to give you money. Right? You guys never seen that sign? Somebody's just sitting there, is like, "Look, no lie, this is for drugs. Please give me your money." Yeah, need beer money, right? I'm probably not going to give them money. Well, right, no, not probably, definitely not giving them money because I don't want to support a drug habit, right? However, giving them food is not the same as giving them money, right? So like cool. There's I don't know. Whatever the closest fast food. Like, hey, do you want something to eat? I'm heading this way to get a sandwich myself. Do you want one? Cool. All right. Maybe. Or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe the circumstances like I would not want my wife to be alone with a homeless man. I wouldn't expect her to do that by herself. So like there's wisdom that comes into play, but it's a practical example of you're doing God's will. What if something terrible happens while you're doing God's will? It could happen. It could happen. You could enter into a storm. Okay, let's think of broad categories like let's see. What about for the student? What has God called students to study, right? Study, learn. What yeah, what are stewards with time. Hmm? Like, ooh, have an opportunity to to hang out with so and so, or I could study for whatever exam, or write this paper, or fill in the blank. That's a choice. What are you going to choose, right? If you're a student, how are you going to steward your time? Let's say, so yeah, let's do hmm, right. Right. So now, yeah, now that let's say we have marriage as the category, right? So we're thinking husbands and wives, relationship. Okay. What are the things that you're called to do, like doing God's will, called to do within marriage? Okay. Yeah. Right. To yeah, to your own husband, right? Not to. We're all you're saying it, right? Yeah. You make it so easy, baby. Yeah, you make it so easy. Oh yeah, you're just helping me to be conformed to the image of Christ. Ah, what a blessing. Amen. Right, exactly. Right. So let's say you decide as a husband or as a wife to you start putting this practically into effect, right? Loving your wife. So like, right, I'm a husband, so I'll be like, okay, cool. Let's say I get home and instead of like, oh, I'm really tired, kick my feet up and rest a little bit. Let's say I help because I know, let's say I help with putting the dishes away and do something else, right? Trying to help Tammy out. Let's say I'm doing that. And let's say I'm doing that, but I'm not really getting recognized for it. Seem like she's noticing. Doesn't seem like I'm doing God's will, and it doesn't seem like it's benefiting me. You didn't put it, yeah, yeah, right, right? Yeah. How long is the new dishwasher going to sit at Lowe's before you go pick it up? Okay, she didn't say that, but no, you didn't. You didn't. To be fair, but that was an example that popped in my head. Like, right? You could have, but you didn't. I know you didn't, but I'm trying to think of like, right? I wouldn't expect her to go pick it up. Like it's like, okay, that falls on me. Cool, I should go do that. But now it's been 3 days and it's been sitting there. Like what's going? Do you not see the broken dishwasher? There's a brand new one that we just bought. We could have clean dishes. This is all hinging on you, Gerald. Like I could see that, right? I could. Can you see how that kind of thinking, right? That's what. Yeah, get in there and wash those dishes. Yeah. Yes, sir. I get, no, yep. So, right. Practical application, but every day it happens. Right. It's like, yeah. Well, so right. It's like I'm doing what God has called me to do, and it's not resulting in the Christian life that I expect there to be. What do you do with that? Okay. Ah, okay. But that mindset right there, yeah, is a different mindset. No, no, definitely not. Yes. Ah, but yeah, yeah, definitely. Tony. Mm. Yep. So yeah, these would be the kinds of applications. So like if you're teaching, let's say you're teaching from this passage, right? And you're like, okay, now you have to think of your audience. All right, who am I trying to make application for? If it's up in the sanctuary on Sunday morning, there's a billion different options, right? Because there's a bunch of different life circumstances of all the different people that are in the room. But there's going to be general categories that most people fit into, right? If it's like like we have marriage and parents, and that's usually like most people get married, most people have kids, right? That's going to be pretty common application territory. But what about the single person? That usually gets forgotten most of the time. Most of the time. But there needs to be application for that person too. Like what kinds of things in their daily life where like they're trying to do what God's called them to do, and it's not going the way that maybe they thought it, or it's way harder than they expected it to be. Like, why is God calling me to give this thing up? If I don't have that, I know I'm going to be miserable. Then it's like, what's that thing? Or if it's, maybe it is a desire to be married, but there's no prospects. How frustrating can that be? Can that be a storm for somebody? Like, absolutely. Or maybe it's like, I'm not interested in marriage at all, but like trying to live on my own in this economy is really difficult. Maybe if I cut corners on something, I can have more money and it'll be easier for me. Like, that's another possible application. Like, are you going to choose to do what God's called you to do, follow what He has commanded, or like, I don't know about this. I'm gonna do this other thing. And what's interesting here, oh wait, here. And you could like just spend time pondering, like once you have the general idea, like how would you summarize what the teaching is in one word? What's the main theme of this little part of the story? One word, what's the theme of what's trying to be conveyed by Mark in this case? Continue. Okay, that's an option. Trust. Did I hear hope and faith? Hope. Okay. Obedience. Right? They're constrained to go into the boat and then they're being obedient. Okay. Faithfulness. Okay, perseverance. Okay. All right, so these are broad themes, right? Let's narrow it down by adding an adjective to narrow it down. And I think I'll give you what I think. And I gotta refer back to this. Jesus constrained them to get into the boat. This is this is godly faithfulness. So it's not a doing your own thing and then suffering. It's like this is what could happen within godly faithfulness. This is what godly faithfulness could look like. And then once you have that idea, like, okay, now the details of the story can support that theme. And then all of your practical examples of godly faithfulness, in spite of fill in the blank, or a certain category of application, that's where you can start filling in those things. But you have the theme in your mind, and then you start putting those things together. And the where it ends is really interesting. And so like your first point, I was going to break this down, which I might because I'm teaching in 2 Wednesdays. So you might be seeing, we might be talking about this more and more. But he constrains them to go into the boat, spend a little bit of time talking about, okay, this is where they're supposed to be. They're called to this. And right now we're in the perspective of the disciples, not necessarily Christ. Then they're toilsome, torturous, rowing, they're fighting, and it's hard. So it's like godly faithfulness can be hard. That's like point number 2. And then you can just preach on how hard it can be. You can pull in other stories from the scripture to support that point. Godly faithfulness can be really hard. It can be so hard, and this would fall under this point, that you misinterpret God coming to help. And he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. And about the fourth watch of the night, he cometh unto them walking on the sea, and would have passed by them. But when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit and cried out. Now they're freaking out. Here's Jesus in their midst, and they don't see him. Why is that? Well, certainly, yeah. They don't expect to see Jesus. Do we expect to see Jesus in our godly faithfulness when it's hard? Right? That was just like immediate. I just turned what you said into a question, and now it's like your mind starts to work on the application. And you in the audience start to apply, like you already know what's hard in your life. You know where the pain points are in your life. I can try and guess at them. And for a pastor who knows his flock well, he'll know where the teaching needs to land and expose those applications. Hopefully try to be helpful and give you hope to persevere through the storm. Persevere, right? They misinterpreted it, and it's because of the storm. It's the circumstances that they're in. They're distracted by the circumstances. Like, okay, now I have this distraction category. And just start pondering about what are the things that distract us, that are so distracting that we don't see the Lord for who he is when he shows up in the middle of the storm. And he says, be of good cheer, it is I. That's so cool. And then everything is fine when they realize who it is. It's like, all right, how in the middle of your storm can you see Jesus showing up? That's another. Yep. Right, it's calm. And it's like, yeah, the winds ceased and they were like their minds were blown, right? But their hearts were hard. And so I think that's like Mark going, this is what you should get out of this. When you can't see Jesus for who he is in the middle of the circumstances, because the circumstances are so distracting, there's a hardness of heart there somewhere. And so storm becomes a metaphor of the heart being hard. It's like, what areas in your life is your heart hardened towards God that when he shows up, it bounces off? And if they were soft, when he shows up, everything would be calm. What are those things? Mm-hmm. I know, they still... And, yes.
No, I'm not calm. You let me go through that. What are you doing?
Yes, and he's still gracious, and he still calms the storm. Oh man, God is so good. Yeah, even when their heart... my alarm went off, so we should stop. But like, oh, isn't that exciting? Like, it's all just, you just have to dwell on it a little bit and try and tease these things out. Oh, it's so so good. I should stop this.